More information's coming out about the Vikings situation with Justin Jefferson, so let's get into some contract details here on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that? 3, 1, 2, 3.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers, I appreciate y'all so very much. If you're new, hello, what's up? My name is Luke. You can find this show anywhere you find your favorite podcasts, including the SiriusXM app. You can also find the show on YouTube or Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Today on the show, the first thing I want to do is address some of the talk we had about Justin Jefferson. And I'll be honest with you, none of it is going to be anything new. There's no major breaking news. You didn't miss anything huge over the weekend if that's what you're worried about, but there are a lot of people who I think are like kind of anxious about some of the reports that are coming around. So I want to at least just like set all the records straight based on at least what I can tell about the situation. And then the rest of this is we're going to talk about Bo Nix. Nobody wants to, but we have to. So I'm burying it in an episode about something else. But he's the last quarterback that I have talked about on this show, that I've really taken time to talk about on this show as the possible quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. What would that be like? How would he fit? What do we like? Do we not like about him? He's kind of a weird eval. And what that means is now that I've done the Big Six, I can look at the draft board and say, okay, how comfortable am I going into that draft without a quarterback under contract? And that sort of becomes the next thing to think about, which, I'll work my way through over time, or maybe a little bit today. But first things first, Justin Jefferson. So there's a Florio article that came out, and I will always say when it comes to Florio, grain of salt. All right, grain of salt. Not that he's not a guy that probably has conversations with people. I mean, he's been covering sports for a long, long time. I'm sure he has plenty of relationships. But rather that there is a sensationalism that comes with a Florio article that you sort of have to try to look past if you really want to read it and like actually glean the real information that's there. So earlier in the season, or maybe right before the season, right after it came out that the Vikings were not going to get that Justin Jefferson contract done before the season started, which if you listen to like Darren Wolfson, they got really, really, really close. You got to remember that they got within like a couple of little details of actually having that contract, but ultimately the hang up was in guarantee structure. This is what Florio said. It was in guarantee structure, and not just in guaranteed money, but it was in guaranteed structure. So he wrote an article today or on Monday, and he also went on KFAN and talked about it. And the information that came out on that was that, the hang up is guarantee structure, kind of reiterating the same thing. Now, to my knowledge, the Vikings have not yet gone back to contract negotiations with Jefferson. It's just not at that point in the calendar. Not that they've like refused to or anything like that, but they have Kirk Cousins and Danielle Hunter with like much tighter deadlines. So they're working there. They're getting that stuff done, as well as guys like Marcus Davenport, who actually, I believe he becomes a free agent today, if I'm not mistaken, if the Vikings don't extend him. So he will void out and become a free agent. So they've got those decisions and like other high priority moves to make, free agency, the draft, all of that stuff, all is on a tighter schedule than Justin Jefferson is right now. Right. So wouldn't be surprised at that. So I don't think anything will have changed. So I think that that's Florio reiterating, hey, this was about guarantee structure. So what do I mean by guarantee structure? What is that? So when you guarantee a player money, most of the time, it doesn't matter whether you see full guarantees or vested guarantees, right? But it can make a player feel a little bit more cuttable if the guarantees are vested. So there's two different kind of like types, I guess, of fully guaranteed contract. Let's say I'm gonna sign you to a 3-year contract. You're gonna make $15 million a year on that contract, and I'm gonna fully guarantee all of it. That's the Kirk Cousins style, right? Kirk Cousins has had fully guaranteed, none of this vesting, none of this, or I think he has had some like vesting guarantees earlier, like I think he had it in like 2019. He had vesting guarantees or something like that. But that's the way you think of guaranteed money is we are promising you this money. We are beholden by the NFLPA to pay you this money. And in fact, when you do that, you have to put the physical money in escrow. You have to liquidate that money and put it in escrow, put it basically aside from the finances of your business so that even if you go bankrupt as a business, that money will still be paid out. Like that's part of how the CBA works, that even if, the Minnesota Vikings declare bankruptcy or the NFL shuts down because of some the unforeseen, right? That money that was promised to a player still gets paid out to that player. This can create a weird cash flow issue that has nothing to do with the salary cap at all, or like spending power or free agency power, or has nothing to do with anybody else's contract or anything. It's literally just it's almost a taxes thing. And it really only matters if you like really care about Ziggy Wilf's pocketbook, which personally I don't. But in case you're curious, that can create a really big issue. Let's say the Vikings sign Justin Jefferson to a $125 million contract and they fully guarantee $90 million of that. Well, they suddenly have to take $90 million out of their finances for that year and put it in escrow. That's kind of a difficult thing to do. So what the Vikings have done with a lot of players lately is vested guarantees, where you are basically setting up a structure where it is impossible to envision a scenario where that player does not see that money, but the guarantees do not vest, or it's almost like announcing an announcement, kind of like. So he would have like next year fully guaranteed like normal, and then the year after that would be unguaranteed salary, but it becomes guaranteed on like March 4th of the year before. So let's say it's 2025 and 2026, right? So his 2026 season would not be fully guaranteed, but in March of 25, it would become fully guaranteed. Now, so to save that money, you'd have to cut Justin Jefferson before 2025. And usually with the contract structures, that's going to carry way too much dead cap, and it's going to be an insane thing to do, really, really hard thing to actually maneuver, but it is technically possible. And it seems like that is the sticking point where Justin Jefferson says, I don't want this vested crap. Just guarantee me the money. Just guarantee me the money. And the Wilfs wanted to do like vested guarantees, right? So another thing that got people really worked up is that Florio on KFAN said, like, this is a Wilfs policy that you don't fully guarantee anything past the first year. My guess is that is actually like necessary. Like that's actually a cash flow thing that has to happen. I don't think that is an issue that's very difficult to work out, because you can put like, you can put clauses and apparatuses in place that ensure that Justin Jefferson will see that money, because all he's going to care about is that he must see that money. But what it sounds like to me is that the Vikings and Justin Jefferson did agree on a number, and it's just a matter of, and maybe even agreed on an amount guaranteed in that number. And it's just a matter of the payout structure and those guarantees that was the sticking point. And that is a fairly small detail and a fairly easy thing to negotiate, where you can say, okay, maybe we won't vest as much of the guarantees. Maybe we'll make more fully guaranteed than we usually will because you're a special player. We can make that exception, and they have to have that conversation. The disappointing thing for many of us, and I know we don't like waiting. This is not a world where we like to be patient, but you might have to be here, is that this is just not the conversation that's on the top priority for the Vikings right now, just because of the way the calendar works out. Justin Jefferson is not slated to become a free agent in this calendar year. There are other players who are. That has to get dealt with first. Free agency and the draft all have to get dealt with first, and then you can do this. So my guess is if we are going to do this with Justin Jefferson, it's going to be in the summer. And then if they don't, so here's the worst case scenario, right? They don't get a contract done. Justin Jefferson says, for whatever reason, you drafted a quarterback I don't like. I'm not signing a contract or whatever. The Vikings can exert 2 additional years of control. So they've got him on the 5th-year option for 2024. And then 25, they can franchise tag him. And 26, they can franchise tag him again. It'd be very expensive, but I mean, so would a contract. So like, I think that's perfectly fine. So you could theoretically have 3 more years of Justin Jefferson before he walks, even if contract negotiations completely fall apart and crumble, despite how close they were before the season. That would be a pretty surprising outcome to me. But of course, I don't know any of these people. I've never met any of these people that are the principal parties here. So all we get to do is wait and see. And while we wait and see, why don't we talk a little bit about some quarterback and not go crazy over something that hasn't even happened yet. This is always the thing that I say. If you're worried about an outcome, don't be mad about that outcome before that outcome happens. That's how you get yourself worked up into a frenzy over some dumb stuff that like didn't end up actually coming to fruition. Don't do that to yourself. You don't need to do that to yourself. You could just I don't know. We could just talk about some quarterbacks. So speaking of moves that people are anxious that the Vikings will make, let's get into Bo Nix. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel, and it's the best place to go get into some gambling. If you're looking for something to do to pass the time while football is out, you maybe want to go gamble on some basketball or some hockey. You've got quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and all kinds of other stuff. And right now, if you're new, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's any $5 bet. You can go pick some heavy favorite money line, slam that thing down for $5, and assuming it wins, you can get 30-1 odds on it in bonus bets. $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Minnesota Sports and their 24/7 live streaming channel of all things Minnesota sports, all the biggest news, stories, and analysis that you need from the Locked On Network at all hours of the day. Flick that thing on in the background no matter when you need it. If you're a night shift kind of person, you can still get that good Minnesota sports talk that you may want. Go check that out. Let's move on away from this stupid Justin Jefferson thing that you don't need to freak out about at all. And that is it's just not that time of year right now. This is just not when this is going to get resolved. You don't F5 for it. Instead, I'm going to subject you to talk about Bo Nix. Okay, calm down. All right. Just bear with me. Give me a shot here. All right. It's weird. Like nobody wants to hear about Bo Nix. And I think everybody has just kind of decided that he's like the black sheep of the draft and that everybody's going to hate him and that's going to be the deal. And I want to encourage you away from that. Not necessarily because I disagree, which I have him sixth of these six guys, but more that I don't want you to just take whatever everybody else says out of osmosis and run with that like it's your opinion because you're doing what you're told. All right, we can be smarter, right? Like we can be a little more courageous than that. We can go be right or wrong on our own merits, right? So let me give you a bunch of information and you decide what you think about it. So here's the elephant in the room with Bo Nix. The thing that really breaks everyone's brain is that Oregon's offense ran a ton of quick game. Do you remember the Chicago Monday night game this year? Vikings in their throwbacks. Bears didn't score a touchdown in that, right? Really great Brian Flores game because the Bears ran like 22 plays behind the line of scrimmage, passes behind the line of scrimmage. So they didn't really push the ball at all until that last drive at the end. That was the game-winning field goal drive. Oregon just lived like that. It was tunnel screens, bubble screens, smoke. It was RPOs, all kinds of quick game stuff. And while there is some merit to watching a quarterback that, can set his hips for play action and then move his hips back the other way, and you can at least see the flexibility and the quick footwork there, it's like, you need to do so much more than that in the NFL, right? So when you do all that stuff, people kind of see that and go, wow, this offense was like super Mickey Mouse. It won't translate. And then they'll just kind of write them off and that'll be that. I think that is frankly a little lazy. And I think we can try a little harder than that. We can take something from that quick game, but basically by the end of the world, by the end of the time I was watching him, I was just fast forwarding through all those clips. Like, okay, I understand that he can run an RPO. Great. We can write that down. Can run an RPO. That is one skill. And then basically I'm trying to, isolate just the plays where he was asked to do a little more, to read across the field, to make a harder throw, to deal with a little bit of pressure. How did he do on all of those things? And what I found, I honestly had a difficult time coming up with any kind of strong take on. It's fine. And if you want something to take away from Bo Nix, if you're one that's like, yeah, I just want to really know what this guy thinks about Bo Nix, it's fine. It's there. He's the arm strength. It's not, he doesn't like zip balls, but he gets them there most of the time. It's deep ball. He doesn't hit as many. He doesn't make really impressive throws, but like if it's wide open, he's not gonna blow it. He throws a good go ball. There's that. Like, he can read the field, but not particularly fast. Like, nothing is like eye popping off the tape. Oh wow, this dude's such a cool quarterback. But also none of it is disastrous enough where I like don't want this guy on my team at all. Like I said, it's there. I know, ringing endorsement. And like with all 5 other quarterbacks, even Penix, who I do not like very much at all. I think if I had to point out one deficiency that like actually bugs me, that like I actually am concerned about at the next level, it's throw velocity. He can throw a decent go ball. It's a pretty good go ball. Those deep balls down the sideline that are layery and you have to kind of feather them in. He can hit those. It's when you have to like zip one into a tight window into coverage or slants that require a little more velocity. I mean, there are even plays where he's on the college hash and he's throwing an out to the far side that requires a little bit of arm strength, but he has to angle them super, super back so that receivers can come back to the ball. And by the way, the receivers he was dealing with, I hate them all. I know some of them are like supposed to be like hyped up draft prospects and stuff. Don't listen to it. Those guys are booty. So he has to like trust those receivers and doesn't always get it to like come back to the ball a little bit. And like, think about geometry, right? You're standing on the far hash. You're trying to throw like a 10-yard out. Ideally you're throwing that thing on the sticks, right? Like right at 10 yards or the first down marker. But depending on where that corner is and depending on how long it takes you to get the ball there, you might have to give up a yard so you can throw it further away from that DB. And then the wide receiver has to come back and get it. And you can kind of see how conservative he will be about these kinds of things. So, okay, he can get touch on the ball, but he can't get zip on the ball. And if you watch the way that he throws, he's not stepping into those throws nearly enough. And it's a pretty consistent issue for me. I think that's a fairly easy fix, but anytime you have assembly required coming out of the draft, there's always a chance that problem just never gets fixed because he just doesn't get to the right environment. He has to start right away and he can't work on his mechanics because he's too busy learning the playbook, or he just doesn't pick it up. Like he just isn't able to get that habit or whatever. Like there's all kinds of different risk factors that risk you never fixing that problem, even if it's an easy one to identify why it's happening, which at least I think I've identified why it's happening, but who knows, right? Like who knows how likely I am to be right. But I would say if he steps into those a little bit more, he can get a little bit more velocity on it. But what you see is that every time he throws, he's throwing really tall. If you remember me talking about JJ McCarthy and the deep ball, I actually have an article that should be out today on Wide Left about this in particular. But one of the things you want to do on the deep ball is you want to throw tall. Instead of really stepping forward and like driving your way through it, like you're a pitcher throwing a fastball, you more so want to throw all like tall and have more of like a vertical motion and you're pushing the ball up a little bit, almost like you're shooting a 3-point shot, right? Because you want to get that arc and that air underneath it. And everything he throws, he's throwing tall and layery and touchy, even on, basic routes that are over the middle of the field that, you're not trying to get it over a linebacker or anything like that. You're just getting it to, you're just trying to get it to the guy, right? Where you can put a little zip on it and he never does. Speculatively, very much speculatively, all right, don't freak out at me. I think that is papering over an arm strength issue. He can get the ball deep, right? He can make that layery thing happen. But I think that is I can't get the ball there because I'm just not getting enough torque on my throws. So I'll just kind of layer it so that it drops in the bucket. And that's how he has learned to throw. I think that's suboptimal. I don't think you can get away with that all day. And I think you got to find some arm strength in him. And I don't know if you can find arm strength in him. If you can, then great. Maybe you can get him to get more torque. You can get him to throw it harder and stronger. And an NFL quarterback's coach, I think that's perfectly within the realm of possibility. But it's certainly far from a guarantee. So I kind of see this quarterback that is deficient in certain ways, and they might, and I'm a little worried that they're permanent. And that puts him right with Penix for me. So I see these two guys as sort of a 5A, 5B in this group of 6. They're both the last two for me. I would probably not take either of them in the first round. But the other 4, I would take in the first round. I mean, some of those are no-brainers, but I think they're all guys that if the Vikings got them at 11, I would at least be fine with it, if not actually be pretty happy with it for some of those guys. So let's talk next about the quarterback position and how it all relates to like what the Vikings should do with Kirk Cousins, which is the decision in their laps right now. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is a ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, and they specialize in flash deals and last-minute tickets. So if you get that spontaneous idea, or if you just procrastinated, and you want to go head into an event, even up to an hour into the event, you can still go on and buy tickets. And a lot of times by then, people are just trying to get rid of the tickets, so you can find pretty good deals. In fact, there is a Game Time guarantee, which means that you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and you've got stuff like event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and so on. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's move on to the big gajillion-dollar question of the Vikings here. This is what I've been trying to answer this whole time by talking about all these quarterbacks for the last couple weeks and studying them basically since the Vikings lost against Detroit on Christmas Eve. I was like, F it, we're watching Caleb Williams. Or no, it was after the Packers game. And the question is, can the Vikings afford to let Kirk walk? I just did a show with this title. This has been the question on everybody's mind. If the Vikings let Kirk Cousins walk, can they do so and feel secure in the fact that they will get a quarterback? They will not be left high and dry. It's the scenario everybody worries about, right? You say, we're not going to pay you Kirk Cousins. We're going to go draft a rookie. And then the draft actually rolls around. Somebody jumps you, takes the quarterback, and you're left going, oh my God, it's 11. And none of the quarterbacks we like are. It's only Mike Penix and some other guy we don't like, right? And we don't want to reach on that. You don't want to get pondered here, right? You don't want to end up reaching on a quarterback that isn't actually good, that you're not excited about, just to say you drafted a quarterback. We get it, right? That's the situation you don't want. And for me, looking at the draft board and the teams that are likely to take a quarterback, right? And you look at the Bears, Commanders, and Patriots. Patriots, weirdly, there's a lot of rumor out there that the Patriots aren't going to draft a quarterback. I kind of don't buy it. It feels a little smokescreeny to me, but who knows what will happen. But you pencil those three teams in. The only other team that is quarterback needy ahead of the Vikings is the Falcons. So if all four of those take one and you just stay put, and I like 4 first-round quarterbacks, you do the math and you go, oh no, we're in trouble here, right? But there are teams in between New England and the Falcons that are very much teams that will be willing and eager to trade down. Arizona is probably the best one. They draft 4th, and they're going to really want to be able to. They've got big roster issues, and they want to split their picks up. I would say a new GM in LA. I would say the Giants that have a lot of roster holes. All 3 of those teams at 4, 5, and 6 will be interested in trading down. So just trade above the Falcons, right? So this is the calculus that I have now. Instead of saying, well, I don't know, it depends on if they take Kirk, I'll say, do you feel confident that you can trade up ahead of the Falcons? Yes or no? And if the answer to that is yes, then you can get one of Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or JJ McCarthy. Those 4. And I know I'm a little bit out on an island with JJ McCarthy. I like him a lot more than other people do. And I'm okay with that. I also like Jaden Daniels a lot more than other people do. And it also kind of seems like those are the 2 guys most likely to be available at pick 3, which I find kind of interesting. But no matter what happens, right, at pick 4, one of those 4 guys will be available. They must. And pick 4 might be an accessible place for the Vikings to go. Now they're going to have to trade a lot of draft picks up, and they're going to have to, do capital and stuff, and that's going to be part of it. But ultimately, that's going to be a drop in the bucket, because if you get your quarterback, if you get the guy, and he's the guy, nobody is ever going to say, yeah, man, they got their quarterback, their franchise quarterback that's going to lead their team for 15 years. But I think they paid one too many picks to get him. Like, nobody's ever going to say that. So I don't really care. The rules are different when it comes to quarterback. Pay what you have to. So is that feasible? Well, yeah, I think absolutely. You already have like a pretty good negotiation relationship with Arizona, because the Vikings tried to do the exact same thing last year with Arizona, who is picking in the same place again. They moved up 1 rank in the NFL. Progress. Good rebuild. That's so bad faith. But you already kind of have that phone number going, right? you can talk to the Chargers, you can talk to the Giants, you can talk to any of those teams. If the Cardinals say, nope, we're way too in love with Marvin Harrison Jr., we're not giving up this pick, you can hang up and just call the Chargers. And you can tell them, hey, if you guys don't play ball with us, we're just going to hang up and call the Chargers. We really only care that we're ahead of Atlanta. And you can sort of negotiate that way. Now, if Atlanta is also going to try to trade up, that could put a wrench in things because they're negotiating from higher ground, right? But there are a couple of teams behind the Vikings where the opposite is true. The Raiders and the Broncos that also might be trying to trade up, but the Vikings are ahead of them. So, that you get that advantage. And all this is going to amount to, I talked about this a lot in like week 18 when you were talking about losing that game on purpose. All this amounts to maybe you're going to have to throw an extra 3rd round pick in 2025 in there or something like that, which is going to be very much marginal when it comes to you are getting your QB of the future. If you want to know more about why I feel the way I feel about some of these guys, everybody but Bo Nix is up on my Patreon, and Bo Nix will be done sometime this week. Hope, God willing, Jesus. So all of this is sort of careening toward, I think he can let Kirk walk. You're not sure fire to get the quarterback, but I don't think you're going to responsibly be able to get to a surefire. Like, you can't just rely on keeping Kirk Cousins in-house until you have a season that goes belly up so hard that you get a top 5 pick. Like, that doesn't compute, right? That's not a thing that, unless you're going to actually try to do the Stephen Ross tank and just hope nobody leaks it, which I don't know how I feel about that one on the Brian Flores team. But barring that, which is not an option, you're not going to be able to really manage this such that, let's just get a top 3 pick. Easy, right? Just get a top 3 pick and then hit on the quarterback. So easy. So I think you're in a situation where if you're willing to really, really shell out, if you're willing to be like 3 first-round picks, Arizona, we'll do that. That's an egregious overpay to go from 11 to 4, but we'll do it because we know we're getting the quarterback, and we also know that Atlanta to move from 8 to 4 for 3 first-round picks, they ain't gonna do it. And we say, you know what, we overpaid, but that's fine. We got our guy. And I think if you do that, I can absolutely make my peace with that being for someone like JJ McCarthy. I think that'd be a crazy overpay, but if he works out, I'm not going to care that they overpaid. And if he didn't work out, the fact that they overpaid is the least of my worries because you're going to be a disaster anyways. And by the way, it's going to take you a few years to find that out and you'll have your picks back by then. So I think it's the time to go for it. And a lot of this too is I've got a lot of concerns about Kirk Cousins. The concerns I've always had about Kirk Cousins compounded with he's not getting any younger. He's coming off that Achilles injury. There's now additional risk factors there. It just doesn't feel like the time to like play it scared. I don't think you should play it scared. And this is probably the biggest critique that I've had of Kwesi so far is that he plays a lot of things scared. Not extending Justin Jefferson because you didn't want to do the vested guarantee thing. Just freaking give the guy the guarantees. What are you worried you're going to cut him? Like, do it. If it's like a literal cash flow issue that the business can't handle, which by the way, guaranteeing money in that way is a fairly unorthodox thing to do for non-quarterbacks. So it would be a special situation. And Jefferson's argument is, well, I'm a special player, which I think is pretty persuasive. Figure it out. Do it. Commit to someone, to something. Commit. Stop playing scared. Stop giving yourself weird options and outs and alienating your players trying to do that. Do something and do it with reckless abandon and be willing to commit to a plan that you feel good about. But right now, everything that they have done so far has been in service of avoiding commitment and leaving all your options open, which is definitely wise. But I think it's year 3. It's time to show us what your plan is. Time to put your cards on the table and, see how the community comes up. So that's where I'm at. It's not a strongly held opinion. If you disagree, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to argue with you. But hey, let me know about it tomorrow. It's Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. So get your questions in. I'll put out a call on Twitter. You can also send me questions in the Google Doc in the show notes or send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.